If I could turn back time, I swear, I would never have made that choice. One decision, just one, cost me my freedom, my peace, and everything I had built in my life. People say family is everything. But what happens when the very people you trust the most are the reason you fall apart? I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because I don't want anyone else, especially someone in their 60s or 70s, to go through what I did. Moving in with your children might seem like a sweet idea, but for me, it turned into the biggest mistake of my life. Backstory. Life after retirement, after I retired, I thought I had finally made it. Not just in my career, but in life. I had worked for over 4 decades, paid off my mortgage, raised a family, and now, for the first time in years, I could wake up without an alarm clock screaming in my ear. There were no morning meetings, no urgent deadlines, no traffic to fight, just peace. I lived alone, yes, but I wasn't lonely. My little home felt like a warm blanket, filled with memories, routines, and a quiet kind of comfort. I knew every creak of the floor, every crack in the wall. The garden outside was my pride, where I spent hours trimming the hedges, planting seasonal flowers, and watching birds flutter by. The days were calm, predictable, and mine. I had my books, my old records, and a small group of friends I played cards with every other weekend. I cooked my meals, watched my favorite shows, and took long walks in the park. The air felt fresher, time moved slower, and for once, I didn't feel rushed or pressured. I was in control of my days, and that, at my age, is more valuable than anything. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch and just watch the sky change colors during sunset. That peaceful silence, broken only by the sound of wind chimes, felt like a reward after a lifetime of noise. No one was telling me what to do. I decided when to sleep, what to eat, where to go. And that sense of independence made me feel strong, even in my 70s. Sure, there were moments when I wished someone was around, a birthday call that didn't come, or a holiday spent alone. But I told myself, this is life. You can't have everything. I had my memories, my freedom, and my dignity. And honestly, that felt enough. My daughter would call now and then. She'd ask how I was doing, remind me to take my medication, and occasionally hint that I should consider moving closer to her. But I never gave it much thought. I was okay, more than okay. I was content. Looking back now, I realize those quiet mornings, those long walks, that little home, they were more than just routine. They were a part of me, a part I didn't know I'd miss so deeply until it was gone. Because when everything is yours, your space, your time, your life, you don't just live, you thrive. That was the life I had before I made the choice that changed everything. The turning point. When the idea to move in was offered, it started with a phone call, like so many big decisions in life do. My daughter, Anna, had been more attentive than usual. She'd been calling more frequently, checking in, asking about my health, my eating habits, and how often I was going out. At first I thought she was just being a good daughter. But then one evening, she brought it up. Gently, carefully. Dad, have you ever thought about coming to live with us? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. My first instinct was to laugh it off, not because it was funny, but because it felt so distant from my current reality. I was doing fine. I didn't need help. But she continued. You'd be closer to the grandkids. We'd be right there if anything happened, and you wouldn't be all alone anymore. At the time, I didn't see the red flags. All I saw was love, concern, a daughter who wanted her father near. What kind of parent would say no to that? It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about family. That word meant everything to me. I had spent my whole life building it. Maybe it was time to lean into it. Maybe I was being too stubborn, too attached to the idea of independence. Over the next few weeks, she brought it up more often. Casual mentions, jokes about how I'd finally taste some real cooking, comments about how big their new house was. We even have a guest room just waiting for you. It all started to sound comfortable, tempting, familiar. And then winter hit. One particularly icy day, I slipped on the sidewalk outside my house. I didn't fall, but it shook me up. Suddenly, her offer felt more serious. I began to wonder, what if next time I do fall? What if no one's around to help? What if the silence I love so much becomes the silence that harms me? The thought of family dinners, watching my grandkids play, having someone to drive me to appointments. It started to sound less like giving up freedom, and more like gaining something I'd lost: connection, warmth, safety. That's when I did it. I said yes. I sold my house, the one I had lived in for over 30 years, the walls that knew every part of me, the garden I had raised like a second child. I packed up memories into boxes, donated furniture, and watched movers haul away the last pieces of the life I had carefully built for decades. But I told myself this was the next chapter. This was what love looked like in old age: accepting help, being near the ones you raised. I trusted them. I trusted the future we painted together. If only I had known what that decision would truly cost me. Initial days with the family, the honeymoon phase. When I arrived at their doorstep, arms full of old suitcases and eyes full of hope, it felt like I was stepping into a new beginning. Anna met me at the door with a warm hug, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Her husband, Michael, carried my bags inside with a smile. The grandkids ran toward me, screaming, "Grandpa," like I was Santa Claus arriving early. In that moment, my heart felt full. The guest room they had set up was cozy, complete with fresh sheets, a small reading lamp, and even a framed photo of me and Anna from years ago. "We wanted it to feel like home," she said, and I believed her. Everything smelled like cinnamon and fresh paint, a blend of warmth and newness. The first few days were honestly beautiful. Every morning I was greeted with laughter in the kitchen, the sound of cereal being poured, and little feet running across the hardwood floor. I'd sit at the breakfast table with coffee in hand, watching the family routine unfold, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. Anna would ask how I slept, make sure I had taken my pills. Michael would chat about work, ask me about my days in the army and the kids. Well, they'd bring me drawings, toys, and way too many questions about the olden days. I felt needed. I felt loved. Evenings were filled with board games, movie nights, and long conversations. I had my own recliner in the living room. They even paused shows and asked for my opinion, small things, but they meant the world to me. Everywhere I looked, there were signs that I had made the right decision. They wanted me there. I was part of the rhythm of their home now, and I tried my best to fit in, to not be a burden, to be helpful, to blend in gently. I started doing the dishes after dinner. I picked up the mail every morning. I even helped Michael patch up a leak in the garage. It made me feel useful and included, two things that retirees rarely get to feel. But underneath all the sweetness, I didn't notice the tiny cracks forming. The kids sometimes whispered when they wanted privacy. Michael would occasionally sigh when I asked too many questions about the TV remote. Anna once seemed annoyed when I used too much hot water in the shower. But I brushed it off. This was a big change, for all of us. Adjustments take time, right? I told myself this was just the beginning, that we'd find our groove, that love would be enough to smooth over any bumps. And for a little while, it was. But no one tells you that the honeymoon phase doesn't last, that no matter how loving your family is, when space, boundaries, and privacy begin to blur, something always shifts. I was still smiling, still trying to be grateful, still ignoring the signs. I didn't know then that this beautiful beginning was actually the quiet before a very loud storm, change in behavior, from warmth to wounds. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single day I could point to and say, yes, this is when everything changed. No, it crept in, like a fog rolling in on a calm morning, almost invisible until you're completely surrounded. It started with the small things. One evening, I went to pour myself a cup of coffee after dinner, and Anna casually said, "Dad, just make sure you don't finish the creamer. It's for the kids' breakfast." It sounded harmless, maybe even thoughtful, but something about her tone felt different, less warm, more managing. Then Michael stopped chatting with me like he used to. At first I assumed he was tired from work, but over time the conversations grew shorter, more forced. I caught him once, shaking his head as he walked past the guest room. I wanted to believe it was nothing, maybe a stressful day. But my heart felt it, that sting of not being welcome. The kids, too, weren't as enthusiastic. No more bedtime stories, no more drawings slipped under my door. Instead, they stayed glued to their devices. If I tried to talk, I got one-word answers. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I convinced myself they were just growing up, but a part of me knew. My presence wasn't the magic it once was. Then came the suggestions. Anna would leave a vitamin bottle on my side table and say, "Dad, you really need to start taking these regularly." Michael would comment, "You should go to bed earlier, Dad. Your TV keeps the kids up." The guest room that once felt like mine began to feel like a borrowed space, a temporary setup, like I was only tolerated, not welcomed. The family dinners grew quieter, less laughter, more awkward silences. Sometimes I wouldn't even be told dinner was ready. I'd find out only when I heard the clinking of dishes through my door. Once I tried to cook breakfast for everyone, like I used to when Anna was young. Pancakes, eggs, everything from scratch. But when they came downstairs, no one smiled. Michael mumbled, "We were going to order out today, but thanks." They ate in silence. No one finished their plates. That day, I sat alone in the kitchen after they left for errands. The food was cold. My chest felt heavy. I tried not to cry, but something cracked inside me. That was the first day I felt like a guest in a house I helped build emotionally. Not through bricks and mortar, but through decades of fatherhood. The worst part wasn't the words they said. It was the things they didn't say. The unspoken tension, the side glances, the subtle sighs when I entered a room. The way Anna's tone shifted when she spoke to me in front of her kids, like she was trying to model how to deal with Grandpa. I still smiled, still said thank you, still offered to help. But every act of kindness from my side now felt like a silent apology for simply existing in their space. And that's when it hit me. Maybe I didn't belong here anymore. Maybe I never truly did. Feeling powerless. When you lose your voice in your own life. One morning, I woke up later than usual. The house was already buzzing, kids rushing to school, doors slamming, the dog barking. I shuffled into the kitchen in my robe, half awake, and reached for the coffee pot. It was empty. Not just empty, washed and put away. No one said anything. No one looked up. I stood there, holding a mug with nothing in it, wondering how I had become invisible in a house I was once so welcomed into. That moment stuck with me. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about the realization. I had stopped being part of the rhythm. I had become background noise. In the beginning, I was asked if I needed anything, if I was feeling okay. But now, days would pass, and no one would ask what I wanted for dinner, or if I wanted to join a family outing. I'd overhear plans being made. Vacations, movie nights, even birthday parties, all discussed outside my room, like I wasn't part of the family anymore. I began to notice how decisions were made about me, not with me. Anna adjusted my medications once. I talked to a friend who's a nurse, she said, without even checking with my doctor. Michael moved some of my boxes into the garage without asking. When I brought it up, he simply replied, "We needed the space, Dad. You don't even use that stuff." One evening I tried to voice something small, just a thought. "Maybe we could have dinner together again, like old times?" The response was immediate, casual, but sharp. "Dad, our schedule is crazy right now. Let's not complicate things." That word, complicate, echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. From then on, I stopped suggesting. I stopped interrupting. I stopped trying to be heard. Because every time I spoke, I felt like I was in the way. Every opinion was met with a polite nod, but ignored. Every concern dismissed as overthinking. I was no longer seen as wise, just old. Once, I tried to take a walk alone, just like I used to. Anna saw me at the door and said, "Where are you going? You shouldn't go out by yourself. What if something happens?" I smiled, nodded, and went back to my room. I stared at the four walls, wondering when I had traded freedom for fear. Not my own fear, theirs, and it was caging me. I felt like a burden, but worse than that, I felt powerless, like a child in a grown man's body. I couldn't decide when to sleep, what to eat, or even what TV show to watch. They'd often change the channel mid-episode. No one asked if I was watching, and I never objected. Because when your voice is no longer welcomed, you start convincing yourself that silence is safer. But silence comes with a cost. You begin to forget what your preferences even were. You second-guess your own needs. You learn to disappear, gracefully, quietly, painfully. I had entered this house as a father. Now I was just a guest, overstaying his welcome. The breaking point. The incident that opened my eyes. The journey of personal growth often involves painful experiences that act as turning points, moments that shake us to our core, forcing us to reevaluate our priorities, beliefs, and direction in life. For me, that breaking point came when I experienced an incident that would forever change the way I viewed the world and myself. It wasn't something I saw coming, nor was it something I could have prepared for, but it opened my eyes in ways I could never have imagined. It was a regular day, or so I thought. Life had been moving along as it often does, busy, routine, and somewhat predictable. But then came an event that forced everything to halt, to stand still, and to make me confront my reality. I remember that day vividly, even now. It wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a series of events that gradually built up, culminating in a moment that left me feeling raw and exposed. The breaking point, as it turned out, was not the event itself, but my reaction to it. I realized I had been living on autopilot, going through motions without truly being present, without truly understanding the impact my actions and decisions were having on the people around me. I had built walls, created excuses, and avoided dealing with uncomfortable truths about myself. This incident forced me to face everything I had been running from. I couldn't hide behind distractions or suppress my emotions any longer. It was as if the universe had conspired to push me into a corner, compelling me to confront the truth. And that's when the awakening happened. In the aftermath, I found myself reflecting on my choices, my relationships, and the patterns in my life that had led me to this point. It wasn't easy. The self-reflection was painful, and there were moments when I felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. But it was necessary. I began to understand the importance of vulnerability, the power of owning my mistakes, and the freedom that comes from letting go of the past. I had to break free from the chains of denial and embrace the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. That moment marked the beginning of a new chapter for me. It wasn't an instant transformation, nor was it a smooth journey. But it was the first step in reclaiming control of my life, in learning to face my fears head-on, and in becoming the person I had always wanted to be but hadn't allowed myself to become. The incident didn't define me. It liberated me, and now when I look back on that breaking point, I realize it was the wake-up call I needed to truly live, to not just exist, but to thrive. The shift, embracing a new perspective. It's amazing how life has a way of pushing you to grow even when you don't realize it's happening. There are moments when everything shifts, and for me, this moment came unexpectedly, as it always does. At this point, I had already encountered several challenges. I had struggled, stumbled, and learned a lot along the way. But it wasn't until the breaking point, the moment when everything seemed to fall apart, that I truly understood what it meant to change and grow. It wasn't just about overcoming obstacles anymore. It was about how I chose to view the world and the situations I found myself in. It was about shifting my perspective. This shift didn't happen overnight. It wasn't as if one day I woke up with a new mindset. No, it was more of a gradual process, like a slow unraveling of the old thoughts, beliefs, and habits that no longer served me. And it wasn't easy. In fact, it was uncomfortable at times. But I came to realize that discomfort is often where growth resides. I had to let go of old patterns of thinking, the ones that kept me stuck in the past, and embrace something new. The moment I made the decision to shift my perspective was like taking a deep breath after being underwater for far too long. It was freeing, yet uncertain. I found myself looking at situations from a different angle, considering what I could learn from them, rather than seeing them as obstacles to overcome. I was no longer trying to force outcomes, but rather allowing life to unfold in its own time. One of the most powerful changes that happened during this shift was in my relationship with failure. For so long, I viewed failure as something to be feared, something that defined my worth. But as I began to embrace a new perspective, I realized that failure isn't something to be avoided. It's something to be learned from. Every mistake, every setback was an opportunity for growth. It was no longer about avoiding failure. It was about welcoming it as part of the journey. This new perspective also had a profound effect on my relationships. I stopped blaming others for the challenges I faced, and instead started taking responsibility for my own reactions and decisions. It was freeing to let go of the need to control everything around me. I stopped looking for others to fix my problems and began working on myself, learning to be more patient, understanding, and compassionate with those around me. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt and frustration, times when I questioned if the change was really worth it. But each day, I found myself becoming more at peace with who I was and where I was headed. I realized that the only constant in life is change, and embracing that change, welcoming it rather than fearing it, was the key to my personal growth. This shift didn't make life perfect. It didn't eliminate all of my struggles or challenges. But it made me realize that how I react to the ups and downs of life is what truly matters. Embracing this new perspective didn't mean I had all the answers, but it gave me the clarity and strength to face whatever came next with confidence and a sense of calm. And with that, I realized that the journey I was on wasn't just about the destination. It was about who I became along the way. Every challenge, every shift, every moment of discomfort was shaping me into someone stronger, wiser, and more in tune with myself. The shift had begun, and I could finally see that it was not a destination, but a continuous process of growth, learning, and evolving. I had embraced a new perspective, and it was changing everything. The transformation, unleashing the power. Within it's incredible how change, when embraced fully, can lead to an internal transformation. I had experienced the shift in perspective, and now I found myself on the edge of something much deeper, a personal transformation that would shape the person I was becoming. For the first time in a long while, I stopped looking for external validation. I stopped seeking approval from others, and instead, I turned inward. It wasn't about being perfect. nor was it about living up to anyone else's expectations. It was about finding my own power and embracing it. This transformation wasn't about changing who I was. It was about rediscovering who I truly am beneath the layers of doubt and fear that had once held me back. The process of unleashing the power within was not linear. There were moments when I questioned myself, times when I felt unsure of the path I was walking. But instead of resisting those moments of uncertainty, I learned to sit with them, to reflect, and to use them as stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. I realized that the power within isn't about grand gestures or achieving perfection. It's about embracing authenticity, being true to myself in every situation, and allowing myself to evolve into the person I was meant to be. It was about letting go of the self-limiting beliefs that had once held me captive. I stopped telling myself I wasn't enough and started believing that I am more than capable of achieving anything I set my mind to. This internal transformation also taught me the importance of self-compassion. I had spent so many years being my harshest critic, punishing myself for mistakes and shortcomings. But as I began to understand the true power of self-love, I realized that compassion was the key to growth. It was about being kind to myself during moments of struggle, acknowledging my achievements, and forgiving myself for past mistakes. Self-compassion allowed me to move forward with grace, even when life didn't go as planned. The transformation also meant shedding old habits that no longer served me. I began to distance myself from negativity, whether it was negative people, thoughts, or environments. Instead of focusing on things that drained me, I started focusing on the things that fueled my growth. It meant saying no to things that weren't aligned with my true purpose and embracing the things that brought me peace, joy, and fulfillment. At this stage, I began to notice that my outer world was starting to reflect the inner changes I had made. Relationships improved because I was more in tune with myself and had let go of past grudges. I was more confident, more resilient, and more open to the possibilities that life had to offer. Opportunities seemed to find their way to me, not because I was forcing them, but because I had cultivated an energy that attracted them. It wasn't an overnight process, and it still isn't. Transformation is ongoing. But looking back, I can clearly see how far I've come. I've learned to embrace my uniqueness, celebrate my growth, and trust the process of life. I no longer wait for permission to be who I am, and I'm no longer afraid of what the future holds because I know that I have the power within to navigate whatever comes my way. This transformation wasn't just about changing my life on the outside, it was about changing my relationship with myself. It was about unlocking the potential that had always been there, waiting for me to realize it. Now, as I continue on this journey, I know that my personal power is limitless and the possibilities for my future are boundless. The power within me has been unleashed, and there's no going back. The awakening. Reconnecting with my true purpose as the journey of transformation. Continued, I reached a point where I could no longer ignore the deeper calling inside me, the need to reconnect with my true purpose. Up until this point, I had been chasing external goals, striving for success, and pushing myself to meet expectations, both my own and others. But in the quiet moments, I began to realize that something was missing. It wasn't about achievements or accolades. It was about something more profound, a deeper sense of fulfillment and meaning. The process of awakening was subtle at first. It wasn't a sudden epiphany or a dramatic shift. Instead, it was a slow, almost imperceptible shift in perspective. I began to ask myself questions I had never really taken the time to answer before. What do I truly want? What brings me joy? What legacy do I want to leave behind? These questions sparked an internal exploration that would lead me back to my core values, beliefs, and desires, the very essence of my true purpose. Reconnecting with my true purpose meant looking beyond the surface level of life and diving deeper into what I was truly passionate about. I started to examine my life's work, not just in terms of what I had achieved, but in terms of what made me feel alive. It wasn't about seeking external validation anymore. It was about finding the intrinsic satisfaction that comes from aligning my actions with my deeper sense of purpose. I discovered that my true purpose was not something that could be neatly packaged into a job title or a specific role. It wasn't something that could be defined by the expectations of others. Instead, my purpose was tied to my values, the desire to help, create, and inspire. It was about living authentically, about making choices that were aligned with my inner truth, and about pursuing passions that gave me a sense of purpose and fulfillment. One of the most powerful realizations I had during this awakening was that my purpose is ever evolving. It's not a fixed destination or something to be found outside of myself. It's something that continues to unfold as I grow and learn. As I embraced this mindset, I felt more freedom than I had ever known. I no longer felt the pressure to have everything figured out. Instead, I felt permission to explore, to try new things, and to shift course as needed. Reconnecting with my purpose also meant letting go of the fear of failure. For so long, I had been afraid of making mistakes, of choosing the wrong path, and of disappointing others. But I learned that failure is not a reflection of my worth. It's simply a part of the journey, an opportunity for growth and learning. This shift in perspective allowed me to approach life with a sense of curiosity rather than fear, and to embrace challenges as stepping stones toward my true purpose. Another crucial part of this awakening was recognizing the importance of balance. For so long, I had been focused on achieving and doing, but I had neglected the need for rest, reflection, and self-care. Reconnecting with my true purpose meant honoring my need for downtime, for moments of stillness where I could recharge and reconnect with myself. It wasn't about constantly pushing forward, but about finding harmony between doing and being. As I continued on this path of awakening, I started to see the ripple effect it had on my life. Relationships deepened because I was more authentic, more in tune with my values, and more present with others. My work became more meaningful because I was no longer chasing external recognition, but instead, I was pouring my heart into what I truly believed in. Opportunities flowed effortlessly because I was aligned with my purpose, and life began to feel more fulfilling, more aligned, and more joyful. The awakening wasn't about finding something that was missing from my life. It was about rediscovering what had always been there, waiting for me to see it. My true purpose wasn't something external that I had to achieve. It was something internal, something that had always been a part of me. Now, with this newfound clarity, I feel more confident than ever in walking this path, knowing that I am aligned with who I truly am and what I am meant to do. This awakening was not the end of the journey, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. It was the start of living a life filled with purpose, passion, and fulfillment, a life that is uniquely mine.